So thanks again, everybody, for joining. We have rebranded our formerly known as LegRep Learns to Advocacy Insights. We had heard from some school board members. They weren't sure if they were invited to this meeting because they weren't their board's LegRep. So we wanted to be sure this felt like a completely inclusive environment for all school board members to attend and learn together, although we recognize many of you are LegReps and probably have a unique perspective to offer, as well as some really important things to learn to better engage with your board in your role. So again, thanks for being here. We're recording this, and the purpose of today's session is really to help ground you in the WSSDA legislative and permanent positions that your members, you as members have adopted. So we now refer to them as the WSSDA position platform. They may be permanent positions, they may be legislative positions, but they are member adopted positions that guide our advocacy work year round. So thanks for all that work that you have done. I'm gonna use a PowerPoint presentation just to kind of guide our conversation. Thanks for your patience. And my hope is, it looks like we've got a good number of folks on today, almost 20. So we'll use the chat heavily just to make sure we can hear from a variety of different folks, and may have an opportunity for people to share out too if you feel comfortable, and would invite that. So with that, this year, for the remainder of this year, we will do at least a monthly Advocacy Insights where we'll bring together school board members to talk about really pertinent issues as it relates to interim advocacy efforts. And so today's focus is on the WSSDA's position platform. As you know, I'm your Director of Strategic Advocacy, Marissa Rathbone, and Logan Andrus is your specialist. Logan has a little bit of a strained vocal cord system going on today, so he won't speak as much, which is sad for all of us, but he will be helping make sure that I know when I need to respond to questions or build on some comments. So happy about that. So the first thing I just wanted to engage you all, and this is an opportunity for you to introduce yourself kind of and use the chat. I'd love everybody to respond in some way. We've sort of started this branding campaign that we want you to be in with advocacy. So there are lots of ways to get you involved. There's lots of ways to get you inspired. We want to meet you where you are. So how do we get you in? You may already be in. In fact, I know some of you already are, but there are a lot more school board members who aren't already in that we want to be sure are. So in the chat, if you would respond as it relates to the advocacy of school boards, what are you interested in? It could be a topic, it could be an issue, it could be a position that already has been adopted that you help shepherd through. So your name will be associated with that. If you could just say, I'm interested in, or I'd be more interested in participating if, go ahead and type that in the chat. Then we'll get to know a little bit about who's in the Zoom room. Logan, you feel free to do it too.
Oh, I will.
All right, Debbie Long. Debbie Long is interested in, she's interested in OPMA. I love that. I love that somebody is interested in OPMA. That's good. Jim's into trust lands, facilities, safe schools. One of my new passion projects has been learning about small schools and the unique needs of serving their students. Martha said she's already been in here and she's been here for a long time. It never gets old. That's good to hear, Martha. Glad to have you here. John Cook is in for local control, local flexibility. Crystal Moldenhauer at a Longview, interest in correcting the special education funding. And in fact, you submitted a position proposal that we'll be seeing at General Assembly. That looks real good. Thanks for your participation in that. Amy Hughes, interested in the K-12 Basic Education Compensation Advisory Committee. That's great. Glad to see you're tracking that. Dr. Bergquist, Equity, Mental Health, Social Emotional Learning. We are too, and we've got quite a few WSSDA positions related to those areas. Logan, I think you must have said something about youth voice, making sure that youth voice is part of our advocacy process at the state and local levels. Mike Weisner, wraparound services and anything we can do to improve schools through partnership and state support. That's great. Kerman, one of our new school board members and becoming highly engaged in our advocacy work. Thanks, Kerman. From a small schools perspective, Lopez Island, interested in the effect of levy lid on small schools. Thanks so much for that. So got lots of different, I'm sorry if I missed you, the chat was moving fast, but we'll be sure to download this chat so we can better track what you're into and reach out to you accordingly. But what I see here is a lot of diverse interests, and that's really good because we have 239 legislative and permanent positions combined, which cover a wide gamut of issues. And from what I'm just reading initially here, we have a position for that. If you're interested, the things that you said you're interested in, we have existing member adopted positions on these topics specifically, although they need your advocacy to come to fruition. So great to have you here. Thanks for your interest in these variety of topics. And now we want to figure out how to move that interest into action. So we're going to talk a little bit about the annual advocacy cycle, our existing WSSDA position platform, and we've had some new ways of presenting that platform, and then sharing some strategies for advocacy, both from Logan and my perspective, representing you as WSSDA staff. And then I'm also going to want to hear from some of you about the strategies you're using out in the field to engage with your local communities for advocacy efforts, as well as your fellow school board members, and then how you might be engaging with your legislators. So there's a lot of collective wisdom in this Zoom room. Want to be sure we elevate what you know, as well as what Logan and I have experienced in these roles serving you. So many of you have seen some of the graphics that we've used to help understand the most key point that we continuously say, and sorry if you've heard this 100 times before, you'll hear it 100 times again, is that the legislative session is just a small part of the annual advocacy cycle. So what I have observed is that school board members sometimes come out of the woodwork to be engaged during the legislative session, which is great. Everybody is invited. We want to engage you. We are able to help you sign up to give testimony, to help you craft testimony, to even just sign in either in support or opposition to a bill for the record. So many ways to engage, even help you craft some language or message to your legislators about concerns or suggestions you have. Those things are super important and don't want to minimize their importance. However, the most important advocacy is happening right now. Legislators are already deciding what policy proposals they're going to be bringing forward. They're prioritizing the topic areas that they want to focus on for the legislative session. And you have a unique opportunity right now while school year is still in session to be inviting them to come out to actually see your schools. Now that we're back in person, it's been a long time since they were able to connect with you face to face and see students in your classrooms, recognizing the importance of safe and healthy buildings, rigorous instruction, and engaged school board participation in all of that learning. So I just draw your attention to this visual is a little bit about what's happening kind of from the WSSDA perspective around year-round advocacy. If you recall, the position window was open this last April. Hope that you were aware of that. There was a lot of communication that went out to you about the opportunity to participate, and at the minimum, just to be reviewing the existing positions with your fellow school board members. We got 54 position proposals in through the window this year. That is about twice as many as we have received in recent proposal windows over the last couple of years. So thank you again for a more engaged participation in that process. that because the window has closed, now the resolutions committee looking over permanent positions and the legislative committee looking over legislative positions are now convening last month, this month, and next month to sift through those position proposals, have discussions about their merits, and make a recommendation that will accompany the proposals in the General Assembly handbook. So all 54 of those positions that were submitted during the proposal window, unless someone chooses to withdraw one of them, will come forward during General Assembly, regardless of how the resolutions or legislative committees weigh in on those positions. So they can give it a recommend or do not recommend, a pass or a do not pass as a recommendation with each position. So that's where we're at kind of in this moment in time as it relates to WSSDA work and your position proposals and your position platform. This is a very small graphic for you to see. There's a larger document on our website that you can actually print out, and maybe even Logan can upload it into the chat. But I'll draw your attention to the time frame we're at right now that's a little bit more school board member focused about what you can be doing right now. While session ended in March this year, thank yous are always appreciated. There was a lot of heavy lifting, navigating through a lot of needs, and we landed with an increase to our prototypical school funding model to enhance access to social and emotional learning supports. So that was a big win for us. There were many other wins as well, but that's probably one of the biggest highlights as it relates to your priorities. Another thing you can be doing, as I already referenced before, is inviting your legislators into your schools. You've got a few weeks left. I know you're busy, but it's after assessments, so this might be a nice calm time to bring them in. Educate on the impacts of the session. So during those conversations, it's always nice to say thank you, and then sort of a bit of a reality check. Really appreciate you adding additional social emotional staff to our prototypical funding model. This is how it's impacted us, either in positive ways or not in the ways perhaps legislators intended. Those stories are important for them to hear, and it's maybe even easier for them to hear those stories, especially the stuff that's not as complimentary, while they're actually in classrooms seeing where the rubber hits the road. Review, inform, and submit legislative proposals for consideration. So as you know, the proposal window has closed, but you can still be reviewing the existing 239 positions that we already have in place, which is valuable because many of them will continue forward in their current look and feel without any changes from the proposal window. So I just talked a lot. I'm going to take a pause for a second and invite you to ask any questions. Any questions about what I've run through thus far? Some of you are new to this work, and so I may say position proposal window, and you may say, what the heck is that? So please feel free to ask questions along the way if there's something that you need clarity on, because there are many new names on in the Zoom room today. Your question may be somebody else's question too. So encourage you to be brave with that. Any themes in the 51 new proposals? Oh gosh. I would say in terms of topics, no, they're kind of all over the board, to be quite honest. Just like our positions, there are so many different topics. I would say one of the themes or things that I've noticed is that we had a lot more school districts participate than have participated before. So more diversity in the school districts that have submitted. Some of the school districts that submitted, at least in my time here with WSSDA and in the history that many of my colleagues are aware of, we've got school boards who submitted position proposals who have never participated before, at least not in the last decade. So that's excellent. And another sort of wondering or notice is that there were more proposals that came in related to permanent positions than ever before. So most of the time that position window brings in legislative position proposals. And this time far more permanent positions came in than ever before, about the same number of legislative positions, but far more permanent positions before. So that's a great question, Mike. I appreciate that. Wish I could tell you there was a theme along the topics, but nothing specific. lots of different topics came in. So let's go ahead and dive into the platform itself. So again, I use the term platform synonymously with all of the positions that we have currently member adopted in our suite of positions, which includes permanent and legislative. I'm going to shift over here in a minute actually to our website, but just wanted to call your attention to this link. We'll make this PowerPoint presentation available on the website when we're done. So you can take these PowerPoint presentations and make them your own. I am aware of school board members who have taken our PowerPoint positions and sort of judged them a little bit so they're more relevant to the school board itself and presented them. So hopefully we're doing a little bit of the legwork for you for some of this stuff. I'm gonna take this off the screen and stop my sharing. And while I'm doing that, I would invite anybody to ask another question as we go. Or Logan, even though your voice is strained, if there's anything that's really important you want to be sure that I add from my previous remarks.
I don't think anything to add necessarily, but when you pull up the website, you should show them the catalog.
Absolutely. I will do that. Thank you.
I don't see any questions. Looks like the chat is clear.
Okay. People are learning and eating at the same time. That's good. Sustenance is good. All right. Logan, can you give me a thumbs up if you see the WSSDA page? Great. So I'm going to start with a big thank you, huge kudos to Sean Duke, who is our communications officer, who has taken a major lift, a vision, I think, of WSSDA staff for a while, and actually put onto our website the positions catalog so it is more dynamic. Instead of it just being a very thick document that you staple together, now you can actually go to our website and search, look, print, send, share WSSDA positions as you have adopted them. So really excited to be able to show you that, and thanking Sean for his innovation here. So this is the WSSDA homepage. Go ahead and come to About and WSSDA Positions and click on WSSDA Positions, just helping you navigate in case you need to find it on your own sometime. When you get to this page, there's quite a bit of information on here. Just want to reiterate that the timeline from this past year for the positions window was posted along with the form, and then what's coming up next for you, including what I've already covered, and then looking ahead, that sort of the next stages after our committees have given their recommendations on the position proposals, that we will work internally to develop the handbook, which is for the purpose of preparing for the General Assembly. We will also release an amendment and emergency proposal window. The timeline on that is yet to be determined. General Assembly, we'll talk about this again towards the end of this presentation, is late September, September 30th and October 1st. Immediately following that is the ranking of the positions by each school board across the state. And then we take those priorities, collate them, and determine the legislative priorities of WSSDA membership from that process. And then we all go about to share those priorities with our legislators and shepherd them through the legislative session. So that timeline's there on the right side. Next year's timeline will look different because it'll be a long legislative session. And that means that we'll have to do the position window a little bit later next year, as we anticipate leg session will end towards the end of April at a minimum, assuming there's no special session. So we would look at a position window probably in May next year. There's also a description here of permanent and legislative positions, and that's important to know because while they are both WSSDA positions, member adopted, member written and adopted, they have a slightly different foundation. Permanent positions are more value statements, core beliefs of our membership. Legislative positions are written in such a way to be more activating and more responsive to what probably will be considered during a legislative session, or at least we hope as much. And then just a little bit of a description about how the position platform is informed by this process that I've been talking about here in a video. So a little bit about what's on this webpage. I'm going to go to the positions catalog. And then I'm going to ask Logan if that change to the new website became visible.
It did.
Great. So here's some cool things, just playing around with this, and you can't break this. You won't break it. So you can go in here, you can play around, push buttons, click on different positions, and organize it in a way that makes sense for you. So let's go ahead and just look at, let's say we just want to look at the positions related to capital facilities. Let's say your school district considering next year or in the near future going out for a bond. You want to know what our positions might be. You also want to know what you can advocate for as it relates to buildings with the legislature if you're grounding it in WSSDA positions. So I clicked over here in the categories. All our positions are organized by category. And then as in doing such, I am going to leave a click on both legislative and permanent positions. And you will see here that we've got about 12 positions related to capital facilities and school construction in both legislative and permanent positions. So if you wanted to get even more granular, you could actually, like, let's say you want to know if anything had been adopted in as far back as 1961. Let's just look. Nope, nothing back that far. That's probably good. And then how recently it was amended. Okay, so that might be, you may really want to nerd out on these positions, and you can do that with some of these additional ways to look in. But I'm going to leave it a little more high level and let's say I'm really curious about the school construction. That's kind of a big topic. What does that say? So I'm going to click on it. And you will see the language that has been member adopted in its current state. It'll organize by type. When it was adopted, it'll tell you that here, and when it was last amended. So it may have been amended previous times before, but the amendment date is the last it was amended.
Marissa, two other things to point out on this page. Let's say you find this language and you want to share it with your board or share it with your superintendent or a community member, whomever. In the bottom right, there's that link button. You click that and it will give you a link that you can copy and paste into an email, and it will take whomever you send that to directly here.
Excellent. So I can copy this and then I could go to my email and put the link in and send it directly to my fellow board members or superintendent. So we know what's in there. Another thing to note is if you go to list, this will take you to, because I still have this category and these two types indicated here, this actually will show you the full list of these positions. So this is important because you may miss, I know many of you really like to have paper documents, so it's nice to have it online, easier to kind of organize, more dynamic, but you actually want to print it out. So you can go to the list button and go up to the print there, and it'll print out these positions. And you can do that for all of the positions. So let's say you want basically all of the positions printed out in a single document. You can do that. And you would just click on all of the categories and both types, and then they are listed here. And if you push print, it'll open up another field and then you can print it from there. So that's still something that you can do. What are some things that, let me just ask Rebecca, is there anything that you're curious about or you want to point us to that you think is interesting in terms of the positions that we have in place?
Oh, wow. You said you were going to put me on the spot. I didn't think you really would. I think it's really super interesting for us to be able to know the variety of positions we have around funding. Like, there's
Okay.
lots.
So many. That's a really good point. So let's go ahead and look at that. And maybe let's just look at what we've got in terms of permanent, or I'm sorry, legislative positions, because there are even a lot there.
Great. That sounds like a fabulous plan.
So as you look here, let's go to the table.
Oh, pop quiz though. Before you do that, how many are there? Do you know off the top of your head?
I do not know that, Rebecca. I am ashamed of myself. If I
I
would
don't
have
either.
known, I would have prepared. That is interesting. But if you just scroll, I can say a lot. I can say a lot. That would be a fair assessment. It's not a specific number, but it is a fair assessment. And one thing just to note, and it's a challenge that we continuously work through, specifically through the legislative and resolutions committees, is to figure out where within these allot positions there's duplication. There is an effort by both committees every year to bring forward to General Assembly some suggestions for consolidation. So they may take a couple of positions. I'll give you one specifically. There are two positions here: budget stability and enrollment decline. The language of enrollment decline, I'll just show you specifically, really talks about a dramatic decline in student enrollment and protecting you all against that and any sort of funding impacts in that regard. Then I'll go back under budget stability. There is a reference to declining enrollment here. That sort of says the same thing, although it is specific to protecting about a levy and levy authority due to declines in enrollment. So there's some overlap, but there's some difference. But I'll just tell you that the Streamlining Committee is taking a look at these two positions and considering whether this would be an opportunity to roll one position into another, so that instead of trying to figure out during the prioritization process, should I prioritize budget stability or should I prioritize enrollment decline? Those positions would be less likely to compete with one another and more likely and more evident to be prioritized by your board. So again, one of the challenges with 239 positions is that because there is so much duplication embedded in all of them, it makes it really hard, I think, for all of you to navigate through, as well as to determine, okay, which of these 239 do we really want to prioritize? Because there's a lot of similarity. I would invite at this time anybody from Ledge Committee or Resolutions Committee, or even if you're sort of new to this realm and have a question, if you have a comment or a curiosity or something that you've noticed as it relates to WSSDA positions, to share it with us at this time. And if you do, please put comment in the chat and we'll call on you in order.
Jim has a comment.
Jim Stauffer.
Hi, good afternoon. I have a throat kind of like, or a voice kind of like Logan. So, but I think about these positions, both legislative and permanent, is that those committees try to work them and give a broad stroke to enable our staff folks to be able to have those conversations with the legislators. And there is always something in there, and there's a lot of good work that occurs. Like this weekend, the legislative committee will be working on, and the streamlining committee is working. So I would reach out, if you're a district ledge rep, I would reach out to your director area ledge reps and ask, hey, can you help me understand this? And can we get together, have coffee chat or tea chat or spritzer chat?
That's great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jim. That's a good reminder. Just so you know, in case you're new to this conversation, WSSDA members, each of you elect your representatives on the WSSDA board, on resolutions, on legislative committee, on nominations. So you have an opportunity to elevate your director area's voice through another school director who wants to sit basically in a subcommittee. It's good work, it's hard work, it's additional hours on top of what you're already doing for your own school district. So we so appreciate the work you're doing on the ground, and then also appreciate the commitments that our committee members make to trying to advance this advocacy work at a state level, and most specifically at a director area level. So if you don't know who your director area reps are, don't worry, I'll come back to this. Just want to be sure you know, here under the About, you go to committees and groups, and there's a link here. I'll just quickly do this because I can come back, that you can see who your members are. This is Ledge Committee, your director area, the school district that they're in. When their term expires, you can click here for their email. If you don't know what director area you are in, that's also perfectly understandable. We've got lots of different regions in how we're organized. You can go to how we're governed, director area map. And we were just looking at one. So Karen Chase is here with us today. I know Director Area 1, which means she is one of the representatives in DA1 representing these school boards on the legislative committee. So that's an important thing for you to know. There are term limits on all of those committees, so you too can have the opportunity to serve in this capacity in the future. So I digress a bit, but I thought that was important. Logan, what's the next question, comment, curiosity?
Actually, I think they're all me dropping all those links in the chat.
Oh, great. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I don't see anything else in there right now. Anybody else have questions, comments, thoughts, ideas?
Okay. So I'm just going to, again, go quickly back. So let's say it's the legislative session, or even let's say it's the interim, which is what we're in now. And Logan or I get a phone call from a legislator who says, you know, I am interested in proposing legislation around, let me just think of something concrete. School board member compensation. And so I think, yeah, I remember that we have a position on that. I do know we have a position. I know we have a position on that. Where do I find that? I am going to go here and look for compensation. Here are all the positions that have the word compensation in them. And I know that this is the one I'm specifically looking for. It's the attract, recruit, and retain. And so then I can read this position, remind myself what are the contents, and then I can have a dialogue with that legislator about how WSSDA might be able to weigh in supportively and where we might have some concerns. Not all positions that we have are quite this detailed. Sometimes that's a benefit to WSSDA staff. Sometimes it's a challenge, because if there's a lot of detail, it might mean there's something on the legislative table that you may actually be supportive of, but it's not named in an otherwise detailed position. And what we do in that case is we bring that question or curiosity back to the legislative committee, who we meet with every week during leg session, and say, hey, here's some gray area. Our position says this, the bill says this. We're pretty clear on these areas about where WSSDA membership stands based on the member adopted position. Here's where it's kind of a gray. Where from your director area lens would you recommend we weigh in? So that's why it's also really important, calling back to what Jim was saying, that you have relationship and conversations with your DA rep on the Ledge and Resolutions Committee, because even if we do have a position that's closely related, sometimes they help us suss out the nuance, and there's always nuance when it comes down to legislative proposals. So that's helpful. So I think I'm going to go back since there are no questions floating. I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint presentation because we've got some more concrete concepts to share here. So I last landed on this page. I know you're seeing my. There we go. So we are happy that you're here. Hopefully that you're navigating this and figuring out how all of this works. We are hopeful that you will take some of the information that you've learned today, even if it's just one little nugget, back to your school board regarding your member adopted positions so that you can start learning about them, reviewing them, elevating your own priorities. And so here's kind of a concrete sort of next step in the next couple months. If you haven't done this in recent history, or even if you have, because we have so many positions, it's kind of an endless opportunity for conversation, is right now having the conversation about what you as a board believe your priorities will be going into the next legislative session. So I realize it's May of 2022 and session won't start until January, but like I said, legislators are already establishing what they're considering for next session, and you can help inform that. But having clarity with your board about what's important to you will be helpful in guiding those conversations with your legislators. So get on the agenda. So at a future board meeting within the next month or 6 weeks, have an area where you can discuss legislative priorities for 2023. Use these documents to guide that conversation. But you could even have a broad conversation about what are the top 5 issues that we want to be sure legislators are grappling with on our behalf moving into the next session. And one thing that Logan and I can do is if you identify, let's say it's levy authority, world language access, staffing allocations, we'll just start with those 3. And you say, those are 3 really big topics. I didn't have time to go through the position document. Can you help us navigate how to find the positions that relate to those? Logan and I are happy to help you do that. That's helpful for us and for you because that gives us a heads up on what you believe your priorities will be in advance of the session. It helps you because we can give you clarity on where your fellow school board members within your own DA and across the state stand on those issues. And you might find that one of your top 5 priorities doesn't have a WSSDA position on it. That won't help us specifically for 2023, but it does inform your actions with your legislators. It does mean that you can advocate on your own district's behalf, even without a WSSDA position adopted. And it also flags that during next year's position proposal window, we should probably have a position on that. And you would have the opportunity and knowledge to know what sort of information you would like to submit during next year's proposal window. So that's something concrete you can be doing right now. So I'll just recap. Ask for an agenda item within the next 6 weeks to start discussing what your 2023 legislative priorities are, what the top 5 might be in broad terms. Go to that positions catalog and try to find some of the topics and pull out what WSSDA positions are. And if you don't have time to do that work, reach out to Logan and I, and we'll see what we're able to come up with for you to help guide that conversation into the future. Some additional documents that might be helpful to you are the 2022 legislative session materials. The reason why that's important is even though that was the end of a biennium, a lot of the bills that weren't successful could potentially come back. For instance, we worked hard on combating a prejudgment interest bill The bill did not successfully pass this last legislative session, but you could take a look at it and tell us where your main concerns are. It'll probably come back next session, and there will be many bills kind of in that vein, right? They didn't pass last session, but there will probably be a legislator who will pick something like that up for next year and carry it into the beginning of the next biennium. All of these are helpful resources in having that conversation.
Marissa, we have a couple questions in the chat that I want to take a sec to address.
Please.
First, Jim asked a question about where members can find prior year priorities. I responded back and said those are not on our website, but they can reach out to us and we'd be happy to share those. Another quick question that I can answer is from Mary Sherman about when pre-filing of bills happens. And Mary, you're correct, that is December. And then Marissa, since this question involves a little bit more of a lengthy answer, maybe you want to take a stab at this. Sarah Betnell asks, as this next year is a biennium budget year, can you give us recommendations for how best to engage in the budget process?
That's such a good question. I have to think on that. I will tell you that even not looking at your priorities documents from the last couple of years, your priorities are consistently around the budget. As we noted, there are many positions that relate to the budget. We recognize that's because it's one of your consistent top priorities. It would be helpful right now for us to know what that means, right? Is it special education? Is it levy caps? Is it funding for special programs? Is it staffing allocations? So I'm just visioning next year's budget proposal. As you may be aware, there are many different line items. Some of it is maintenance funding, but there are always some opportunities to advance some of your priorities. So you can get involved and help us right now identifying within that very large bucket of budget, what are the most important things to you? I will say that it sometimes poses a challenge for us, your staff, and I think for you too, that we don't have our priorities as an organization established until October. It still provides us a couple months leading up into session to communicate those priorities. But gosh, it would be so nice to have them right now, to be quite honest. And that's why Logan and I do a look back. And again, your priorities tend to be pretty consistent. So to get more direct, Sarah, to your question, right now, I would ask that you have this conversation that I was just talking about and let us know what are some of the key ingredients to a successful budget as it relates to specific budget items. So is that special education? Is it levy, et cetera, transportation? And that will help inform the conversations we have with legislators to help guide what they include in the budget. I will tell you, I met with a group of education lobbyists and organizations just yesterday about considerations for a transportation bill that would take a look at the STARS formula. I don't know if that will end up being a WSSDA priority, but it most likely will be something that we'll need to engage in to make sure it's the right fit for all of you. So again, be having the conversations now, be letting us know right now what's important to you. And then once the legislative session ends, we get an indication of what sort of policies are moving forward that need budget support. And that's really where we can use your help. So lots of great policies are envisioned and lots of great bills are filed, but without the appropriate funding to go along with them, it's really hard to pass good policy bills without the right resources to support them. So another thing to be thinking of is what is the dollar amount that you would need to have a successful language arts program. I'm trying to think of what other kind of policy proposals. Some of that we just won't know until leg session starts. And so being responsive to our questions about what's the actual cost for a policy proposal like this can help inform what does and does not end up in the budget. And then maybe as we get closer to session, we can invite someone from OFM, which is the Office of Fiscal Management, to give us kind of an overview of how the governor's budget is developed, the governor's proposed budget, and then kind of the process by which the Senate and the House develop theirs, and what are some key points at which constituents or WSSDA members could be involved in informing that development. So a good plug for the future.
So one more question from Rebecca Stillings.
Yeah.
And then after that, a comment from Jim.
Great.
All right, and so this is a clarifying question about a comment that you made around gaps that a district might observe at our platform. One of the things, could you talk a little bit about what happens when legislation comes forward and we don't have a policy that speaks to it? I know one of the things that the Leg Committee does in the interim and resolution committees is we look for gaps, but it's really helpful for us to see a potential gap and address it before it becomes a legislative conversation. So can you talk about why it's important for us to see the gaps and address them? I'm thinking lead.
Let's see. I'm trying to think of how to frame this. So a couple years ago, if you're going to specify lead, Rebecca, a couple years ago, there was a bill that came forward that would require school districts to remediate for lead in the water. And WSSDA did not have a position about that specifically. We did have a very clear position about unfunded mandates. And so we were able to delicately walk the line on this, recognizing that no school board member wants students to be exposed to lead in their water. However, we had to rest mostly on the fact our concerns that the bill proposal did not adequately fund school districts to do what the bill proposed. The bill did not pass because we weren't the only voice with that type of concern. In between the legislative sessions, the position proposal window brought in a lead and water position. That gave a clear sort of statement of advocacy and support around the importance of remediating for lead in the water. WSSDA members believe that that's important and also want to be sure that if required to change lead in water in their schools, that they would have adequate funding to support it. That position held us closer to the bill sponsor, who was, I think, grateful to see in writing that WSSDA membership was supportive of the policy principles and still had concerns about the implementation needs. And I think because of some of those interim conversations and the position proposal that came through, we were able to have dialogue with the bill sponsor that enabled us to come to some more middle ground, so that once the legislator filed the bill, it addressed some of our initial concerns. And we worked with them more in partnership as the session progressed. So that was that was a long way of answering your question, Rebecca. Did it get to what you were trying to get me to say?
Yes. Yeah, that wasn't trying to be too leady. Yes. And it's just, if you're having a conversation about a policy gap at your board, it's very likely that other boards are having the same conversation. And if it's a gap we recognize, we can't as a body address it within the legislature from an advocacy perspective without a body approved position. So say something, worst case scenario, you put it forward and it fails, but at least you tried, right? So it's better to try and fill a gap than have gaps. So thank you, Marissa.
Great, thank you. So we're getting towards the end of our time together. Want to again be sure to field any questions that you have, but I'm also curious. You started with the things that you're interested in. I also would love to know what you're already advocating about. So what are the conversations you're having already with your school board or your legislators? What are the topics? Maybe you've already done this exercise, establishing your district priorities for the next legislative session. Don't want to assume you haven't already gotten a head start on that. But What are some of the things that you might be doing that I've already mentioned? Inviting your legislators to your school districts, having Zoom coffee meetings. What are you already doing in the advocacy realm that may serve as a model to some of the other folks on this Zoom? So you can raise your hand. I can see it'll put you up at the top, and I can call on you to share if you prefer not to type. If you just like to type, that's fine too. We'll have a record of it, but would love to hear maybe from some folks who haven't spoken yet about any sort of involvement or inspiration you have for existing or near future advocacy efforts. Sarah.
Good afternoon. I'm in the Strained Voice Club today, so I hope I'll be understandable. I just want to second the recommendation around connecting with legislators, building relationship, and inviting them to come visit buildings. I've had 2 experiences in the last week where that has just been a really powerful point of advocacy here. So at the end of session, I'm the legislative rep for our school district, which is Shoreline. At the end of session, I just sent all our legislators a thank you, gave them a quick peek into, some of the things that they passed that aided us, and invited them to come visit a couple of our new buildings. I don't think the buildings have to be new to invite them. We just happen to have new buildings that I could invite them to. And a couple of our legislators took us up on this last Friday, and we were able to give them a tour of 2 of our buildings, our Early Learning Center, which is a fully inclusive early learning center, as well as one of our elementary schools, which also happens to have blended classrooms. And the conversation was just really powerful to be able to have them see in person the impact of fully inclusive classrooms, to really advocate for full funding, for full inclusion, for universal design and learning, for special education supports, to have them see the impacts of that multi-level of staffing as well as professional development, and to see the way that facility investments support that learning as well. So it was just it was just awesome to watch our staff, who are just incredible, get to connect with the legislators and shine and brag about, who they are and what they do and the amazing kids that they serve. It was, myself and fellow board member and our superintendent, we really, took a total backseat and just got to love soaking in our staff, hosting our legislators in that way. So that was one example. And then the other was that at 2:55 p.m. yesterday, I got an invite from one of our state representatives to join a 3 p.m. meeting that luckily I was able to join, because there's a potential development happening in our school district that is a multifaceted development that may be able to house a youth center and a teen center and student supports, as well as affordable housing. And being able to join that conversation really helped our school district have a voice in what is going to be a pretty substantive development in our district that will affect families, that will affect students, that will affect early learning, that will affect our teens. And that really happened just because of having regular conversations with our legislators over the past few years.
Thank you, Sarah. That's all very good modeling. Eric, would love to hear from you. Eric, welcome. Glad you're here. Eric Mann, I see that your hand is up, but oh, there you are.
Okay, sorry, I was on the phone trying to hang up with somebody. Yeah, so we have a fairly unique situation here on Whidbey Island where we have three separate school districts that all have some very similar challenges being on the island. So this past year, we've formed a group where the legislative reps from all three schools have been gathering monthly to talk about issues that are affecting all of us. And we've been inviting our representatives to join us. We just had our representative Gilday joined us last meeting, kind of talked about the session and upcoming things. The big key topic we heard from him is he is not finding any real support for ongoing enrollment stabilization funds. So he's recommending that we start budgeting to not have those available this year. But yeah, forming the group of three local districts to work together and advocate at the county level and state level as one group is seeming to work fairly well for us.
Excellent. That's great, Eric. Can I ask a question? Did you initiate that sort of collaboration, and how did you go about doing that?
Yes, I did. It was just before the 2021 ledge session. We recognized that Coopville and South Whidbey had not been very engaged in the advocacy process. And I found out that they had two new members as ledge reps and didn't really understand what was going on. So I just kind of took that on, one, to get those other two local bodies advocating a little more, and also just to let them know what I've learned about the process and where the resources are and connections I've made, because they have a lot of great ideas that I don't, but they just really didn't know how to engage in the process.
Thank you so much for leading by example, Eric. We appreciate that. That has a great ripple effect on advocacy efforts. So let us know how it's going. Maybe we'll have you present one of these sometime. Yeah, got a great comment from Mike out of Spokane. Appreciate that your board is following our advice to start these ledge priority discussions now and engage legislators this month instead of waiting until the fall. Yeah, you know, you can't start too early or too often. Realizing that it is an election year and we're going to have a lot of new legislators this next session. So there's still some unknown factors as it relates to some of the more freshman legislators that'll be coming in. And as soon as those elections are complete and we know who those people are, we will work hard to start building new relationships with them. But in the meantime, you know that those relationships matter with our existing legislators, and you should continue to have conversations with whomever is in place. So that's great. Jim, last comment.
Thank you, Eric. Great work there over on Whidbey Island. And then Marissa, as you said, election season. So it's a real good time to lean into those conversations that are occurring for between legislators that are running for re-election or running just for election. And that kind of gives you a picture of what the conversations could be come December, and also attending like city council meetings. And if there's an economic development council in your county area, listening in or attending those meetings, those are always very helpful at kind of getting some a new look or a fresh look into the what the legislative session could bring us. Those are just some hints that I try to follow. But thank you for this work.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate those insights. Insights, no pun intended. So it is the interim. There's a little play on words that we're working with here. You know, get in with advocacy, interim, in session, insights, involved, inspire. You know, we're trying to get you all excited. Words matter. So this interim, a couple things Logan and I are trying to do to help you is we will have these monthly advocacy insights. We are offering that if you need some materials to help support conversations you want to have with your board, Or if you want us to put some things together to present to your board, if it doesn't get too unwieldy, we can't do 295 by any means, but if there would be a way that our presence would be helpful to you in sort of getting this ball rolling, just let us know and we'll see what's manageable. Looking ahead to annual conference, we're hoping to develop basically a LegReps toolkit, which would be kind of a turnkey way for you to have some video materials and maybe a little bit of a script for, as a new LegRep, how you might engage your fellow board members in conversations around advocacy efforts. So be on the lookout for that, and let us know if you'd like to inform that development. We will always have an orientation for any LegRep. We know that some of you are voluntold into that role, or because you're the new board member, you get this new great opportunity and then you're like, what does this mean? So we are happy to schedule some time to chat with you via Zoom for as long as you need. We've been doing that for 30-minute or 1 hour intervals with brand new LegReps, and it's a great conversation and a nice way to get kind of some one-on-one attention. And we can field a lot of your questions. And then we're also just responsive to developing tools and resources that meet your needs. So we might have something that you're wondering about, or if we don't, maybe we can make it for you. So a couple things we might be able to do in the short term. And then just a plug for General Assembly, September 30th and October 1st. It will be virtual. It will be free. If you have questions about it now, feel free to reach out to Logan or I. This is our general inbox. The General Assembly handbook won't look quite like this, won't be yellow this year. Yellow is not the color of the year, it's lavender. I'm not sure if our handbook's going to be lavender or not. I don't know if I'm going to clear that, but maybe, we'll see. But the handbook will be out sometime this summer and will be another step in your conversations preparing for General Assembly. We hope to have 295 school districts represented there this year. And that's it. So we're a little over time, but want to thank you all for being here today. You stayed with us for the full hour. Hope you got some tidbits of helpful information. And if you didn't, let us know and we'll make sure we're more helpful next time.